Good evening. This is my buddy DJ right here. He is also a recovering addict. He just finished his doctorate in religious education. He is a clinician. He helps lots of people in addiction every day. And he's going to give us a little testimony today, talk about his past drug use and the path that set him free and why he's free today. So thank you, and DJ.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yes.
Hey guys, so Aaron asked me to hop on here with him and just give him a rundown on where I was when I found the Lord, what the Lord's done for me since I have found Him, since I actually surrendered, gave my will and my life over to Him. It was a long road. It was much longer than it needed to be. I know that. Aaron mentioned, he was like, where did it all begin? Where did it all start? And, you would think that it all started when I first attempted to do my first drug or take my first drink. But I can remember the disease of addiction really having a hold of me way before my first drink or my first drug use. I can remember stealing my papa's cigarettes at the age of 8, 9 years old. At first it started with seeing if I could get away with stealing one cigarette and taking it down to my friends and smoking it, and on our bicycles. And then it got to where I was taking a couple cigarettes and no one said anything. He never noticed, And then before I knew it, I was taking a whole pack out of the carton. The old, what were they? At first, when I was like 8 or 9, they were Winston's, and he was a smoker. He used to smoke so much that he, whenever you spend so much money on Winston cigarettes that they start sending you memorabilia. Well, he was one of those guys. To where, anyways, besides to where I was stealing, packs out of the carton before I knew it. I remember always wanting to try to get away with little things, like a little white lie here, a little white lie there, even if it didn't amount to anything, just seeing if I could get away with it. I remember stealing things at gas stations. If I had money in my pocket, and this was at an early age, this was way before drinking and drugging. So I can look back and see where the flawed, the nature, I guess, well, what I would call it today is just the flesh, the nature of sin that was living within me. I wasn't raised in church. I didn't go to church as a kid. The only time that I would ever actually go to church was if I stayed the night at a friend's house and their parents forced us to go. And even if I did go with my friend, it was mainly just to look at the girls, or I wasn't paying any attention to what the youth leader was talking about or anything of that nature. So growing up, I grew up I had a great childhood. Both my parents, good parents, they did the best they could for what they were working with. I was just very defiant, very lost, I want to say that, like, I had, great guidance, but I didn't at the same time. Didn't have good godly good God-fearing parents or anyone really in my life at that time. Or maybe I did just a little bit, but I didn't want any part of it. So that's just kind of, so my first drug use was, I started smoking marijuana around the age of 11 or 12. Doing it, and I liked it. It gave me something that nothing had ever given me before. I guess a little bit of an escape from what, you may ask. I don't really know. Maybe for myself. Life wasn't hard. Life wasn't too difficult for DJ. DJ was pretty close to a spoiled brat that you can get. So, but I found whatever it was, I found what I was looking for. At first, it was through marijuana, which wasn't, super harmful. I was able to continue to use it daily without it affecting too much of my life. you know, go to school, you know, same old, same old. And then eventually that led into the little bit harder things. You know, once you start using a substance such as marijuana, you'll eventually run into somebody that has something else, and marijuana's not doing it for you, not doing it enough for you anymore. So you want to try something else, and then so on. So I really started venturing into the harder stuff around the age of 13, 14 years old. 13, 14. A little bit harder stuff. By the age of 16, I was already dealing certain. I was doing certain. I was dealing certain substances, and you know, once I got my license, it was pretty much game on from there. By the time, okay, so I'll give you this. By the time I was 16, I was dealing, and I was on the road, right? I remember being 16, 17 years old, and I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if I'm going to make it to the age of 18. I mean, that's where my life had gone from 13, 14 years old, and then at 16, 17, thinking, I wonder if I'll see my 18th birthday. Once I made it to 18, once I had my 18th birthday, I remember thinking to myself, like, I wonder if I'll make it to 21. I thought it was a long shot, but the way I was going, I was already making trips out of state. I was running here, running there. I was doing a lot of things that I would never want my child to do, or any child, but I was doing it. And so I remember, you know, at 18, wondering if I would make it to see 21. So by the time I was 18, 19 years old, that's when I first found my way in and out of detoxes, 30-day programs, to the extent of I was such a repeat offender that the rehabs and the detoxes in my hometown didn't even want me to come there anymore. Like they basically put me on the blacklist, which is kind of hard to believe that the only place that somebody like me is allowed to go to get help, those guys didn't even want me there anymore. So, I mean, if that tells you where I was in my life. So from there, you know, I'd extorted I had exhausted the safest place that a person like me could go to the extent to where I had to start telling hospitals that I had to start putting myself into psych units. So, you know, I learned the lingo. I learned how to make sure that a hospital would put me up on the psych unit floor. And I'd done that a few times, especially when it was cold, dead of winter, nowhere else to go. Family didn't want anything to do with me. So that was all the way up until the age of 23 years old or so. And then around 26 or so, or maybe this was around 24, 25, regardless, you're seeing the time frame. My daughter, so it was 24, my daughter was 1, and the only way that I was allowed to see my daughter was if my grandmother came and picked me up from my halfway house that I was living at. The last halfway house. The only halfway house I was willing to put up with my stuff. But I remember being in the psych unit this last time, and I remember having the phone number in my pocket, the guy that was running it, and I remember him saying, like, don't waste my time, you know, like, you know, don't, like, if I let you in here, don't waste my time, you know. And I just remember that vividly, and the fact that I even had his number was just a thing. But so my grandmother would pick me up. My daughter was 2 at the time, like maybe getting ready to be 2. She would pick me up from that halfway house, and she would take me to a little white church. It was my Uncle Fred's church. Uncle Fred was married to the grandmother, so my grandmother that would pick me up with my daughter, he was married to her sister, so my grandmother's sister. So he was just known as Uncle Fred. But what happened though is, for the first time in my life, I'm down and out. Right? I mean, I'm not down and out for the first time in my life, but I'm so I'm so miserable. I'm so what's the word? Defeated, depleted.
Yeah.
I was in just, I was willing to do anything and everything that it took. Now, granted, the only way that I was able to see my daughter is if my grandmother picked me up with my daughter, with her, and I could go to church. So that got me, that got me to where I could see my daughter. But for the first time in my life, I was actually willing to see what church was really about. Because, up until this point, the only reason I would go is if I was forced to go because I stayed the night at a friend's house. And let's be honest, most of the friends I hung out with, their parents weren't taking us to church anyway. So I remember for the first time going, my grandmother picked me up. We went to Uncle Fred's church. It was in not the best area in town. It was a little white church, and there was probably 20 people total in the whole congregation, and a little Free Will Baptist church. And so, and I was probably the youngest one there, besides Ashton. I was probably the youngest one there by 40 years. I would say the closest age to me was somewhere around 60 or 40 years. The closest person to my age was probably somewhere 60, 70 years old. And that was, well, here, I'll give you an example. When COVID came through, it basically wiped half of them out. Like, that's how, so. The reason I'm even sharing that story is it was really funny because now I look back in hindsight. You ever been to a church service and you're sitting there and you're like, man, I feel like the preacher was preaching right to me, Well, the reason I say that is because he probably was preaching to me. I had never been in a church service, and he's an old Free Will Baptist, right? So preaching hellfire, brimstone, and if you're backsliding, if you don't know the Lord, you're all that stuff, and I'm just sitting there. And I'm listening, and I'm like, man, yes, that, I need, you're so right, and I need to get with the Lord, and I need to find but what was wild is I'm sitting in there, and I'm listening to him, and everything he was saying was, scary and real, and I wanted to take part of, but what was the most fascinating or terrifying thing that happened while I was in there sitting in those pews is every bit of my being, everything yearned, like my whole soul was saying, DJ, that's supposed to be you. That's supposed to be you up there preaching that. And it was very surreal, or it wasn't really surreal, it was terrifying. It was not understanding, because I had never owned a Bible. I'd never, the only concept of the Lord or Jesus and God is I knew that there was a God that sent his only begotten Son to die on the cross for my sins. And that was basically the extent of my theology. But I did, my whole life, well, here, I'm going to go back a little bit. Because, so in the madness of me trying to figure out why I can't keep a needle out of my arm, or why I can't stop using drugs, and when I want to stop using so bad, I just continue to revert back to it. I'm having to go to meetings, right? Now, I told you I'm going to halfway houses. I'm getting kicked out of halfway. I'm going to 30-day programs. I'm going to So I start hearing about NA and AA and, all these things. And if you live at a halfway house, if any of you guys know that, if most of them make you do like 90 meetings in 90 days, this type of stuff. And back in my hometown, the only where most of the AA meetings or NA meetings they were always in the basement of the churches in my hometown, which there's plenty of churches back in West Virginia, and plenty of NA and AA meetings. So anyways, the reason I'm even sharing this part is I didn't have much of a concept of the Lord at all, God or the Jesus character or anything of that nature. But in the meetings, when you'd either start the meeting out or end the meeting, or even during both times, you would always say the Serenity Prayer. Now, most of you probably watching this know exactly what prayer I'm talking about. Well, when if you ever heard, like when you're in a meeting, everybody stands in a circle, and you put your arms around each other, you hold hands or something, and you say the Serenity Prayer together. Well, like the one guy that's like, sometimes most people drop their heads and say the Serenity Prayer, but some people like keep your heads high, keep your heads held high because you've had them down long enough. I'm like, I always remember that, but I'd always keep mine down. And I would always keep mine down. I would close my eyes and I would always say the Serenity Prayer. I would always say the Serenity Prayer because, but when I would say the Serenity Prayer, I would always be praying to that God that sent his son Jesus down to die on the cross for my sins. So at least like I had understood that much of the concept, And I feel like it really went a long way for me because, I didn't know the Lord. I wasn't seeking the Lord. I was just trying to figure out how to keep a needle out of my arm or a pipe out of my mouth, right? But in the midst of trying to better myself, I was praying to this God who I didn't know, who I didn't even really know existed, but I was thinking, if he did exist, this is the one I'm praying to, and so I would pray the Serenity Prayer to the Lord, and then I actually meant it. Like I meant it. Like, hey, like I'm saying this prayer, and I mean this prayer. And if you guys know the Serenity Prayer, you understand like the implications that that are granted for you in the Serenity Prayer, which little by little. Now I wish that I could like pinpoint like that's when he answered the prayer, but I can't. The only thing that I can say is that at some point I did. He gave me everything that I asked for in the prayer. Everything that you when you say the Serenity Prayer, like it was answered, and it was answered efficiently and effectively. The only thing that was in the way between him answering my prayer and the prayer itself was me, because I continued to take my will and my life back into DJ's hands. That was the issue, and I didn't understand. And that's probably, if I wouldn't have done that, I probably could pinpoint. But there was some type of awareness that came eventually down the road that, so I remember, I know for a fact the Lord started answering prayers for me before I found him. Okay, so I do know that for a fact. So if you're there thinking that you don't know the Lord and he can't, that's a lie from the enemy. He's trying to keep you in bondage. He's trying to keep you in the shackles, and he's trying to keep you in the lies. Amen. Because he can. He does hear you. He is capable of freeing you, even if you don't know him. Amen. Okay. But with all that being said, I'm going back to sitting in that pew, listening to Uncle Fred yell hellfire brimstone, and me trying to figure out why in the world I thought it was supposed to be me up there doing it. So that's church service, it ends, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, why in the world do you think that you're the one that's supposed to be up there doing that, And then, so within a couple weeks, I went back the next week, and within like 3 weeks, I was saved and baptized in that church. Actually, still have the Bible that Uncle Fred, old King James Bible, it's actually in the dash of my car, my vehicle right now, and that was back in 2013, I think, 2011, 2013. Anyways, and that's when I turned into Jonah. I felt it in that pew that's what my calling was. That's what I was supposed to do, and I ran. I didn't run. It wasn't like the Lord came to me and said, DJ, this is what you're supposed to do, but like I knew. I knew after I sat there and I'd given my heart to the Lord, and that's where my first encounter was, like in that pew. That was before I got saved. That was before I got baptized. I had an encounter with him that day. Amen. And he told, and I knew it in my whole being. And it wasn't that I purposely ran. I didn't purposely. I just didn't understand like what it. I just.
Scary.
I wish that I could explain it better. I just know that I know that I know that I know. And what I do know is I didn't. I must have needed a little bit more time, a little bit more experience out there. Probably not, but that's what I'm going to say, because it did make me much stronger. It did make me much sharper when it comes to this stuff. You want to talk about somebody that's been to hell and back. You want to talk about somebody that has that has encountered a lot of different things. Aaron, I know that he recently had a video that came out about meth use and spiritual warfare. It was spot on. I relate a lot to it. I understand it. And I do know for a fact that, oh, by the way, I'm a clinician here in North Carolina, and I deal with men and women that come in off of meth. And I know for a fact that they're dealing with spiritual warfare. I know for a fact that if that drug itself isn't purposely created just for spiritual warfare, regardless if it's not, I believe that it probably is. But even if it's not, it's still happening, regardless. And I know that the enemy has his hands in anything and everything that he possibly can down here. So with that being said, I really enjoyed that video, Aaron. And I really don't know where I was going with that rant, but just to give you an idea of where I've been spiritually, where I've been fighting the demons, where I've like what certain drugs have done to me, what they've done to my families, what they've done to individuals that I see on a daily, like I understand the implications of what's going on, what's at play here.
Yeah.
But
a lot of authority. Yeah.
A lot of because it's so anyway, so I ran like Jonah. I wasn't purposely running from God telling me to go save, but I did know in my heart that that's what I was supposed to be doing, if that makes sense. To where I stayed out for a little while longer. I would come back and forth, but see, this is where what's weird, or not weird. It's just I started noticing that anytime that I would go out and use, it happened much faster and much quicker. I would either get in trouble faster, or I would find, the drug use would stop happening. I wouldn't be able to use as long without repercussions, right? And I would account that probably being the Lord, not allowing me to stay out any longer, because, hey, bro, do you not remember that time that we spent in that pew at that little white church in the bad part of town? So anyways, here and there mess up, and then eventually I did a pretty good. It wasn't pretty good at all. It was what landed me down here in North Carolina. And what landed me down here, well, gosh, man, I feel like I could have so many different videos.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do another one for sure.
I feel like I have so many different videos that I could share on. But the Lord comes to me in my dreams, okay, and He comes to me in visions. But the visions usually come in the dream state, and He always, if it's okay. So I landed down here in North Carolina, right? And I could see I have to backtrack a little bit, because back in my old church, not Uncle Fred's church, a different church. It's a much bigger, much different denomination, and I was going there for a while, and there was this guy, and I didn't know, because at this old Free Will Baptist, it was always singing hymns, and the choir was basically the congregation. Like the choir was singing hymns to no one besides me and Ashton and my grandma in the pews, and then they would come down. And that's where I found the Lord, and that's where I knew the Lord was there. I do, and all those things. And then eventually, a couple people had talked me into going and trying this church out, and I was very skeptical because it was a much bigger church. Anyways, you know how the whole thing goes. But I need to share this story because it's the whole reason I'm still down here in North Carolina, and it's just the whole reason that the Lord, once He puts something on your heart, He means it, and He will not take it away from you, even though you try so hard not to receive it. Okay.
That's right.
But so I wound up down here in North Carolina, and but just a few years prior, probably 3 years or so prior, there's this prophet named Ed Trout. Ed Trout, he's a white guy from Africa, from South Africa, and he's a world-renowned prophet. I didn't know anything about him. I'd never heard of him, but everybody at this church knew who he was, and they were extremely excited to see him because they were all hoping that they could get a word spoke over them, right? And what time was it? Okay. And so, actually, you know what? Let's just make a part 2.
Yeah, let's do a part 2. Yep.
Let's
So
do
I
a
gotta
part
pick up
2.
the kids.
Yeah, you pick up
yeah, that's great. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, folks. We will definitely do a part 2.
Yeah, let's do a part 2.
If I'm late for the kids at daycare, I'll be in big trouble. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that happened yet.
Hey, man,
But,
thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you, brother. I sure do appreciate it. I love you, man, and I'm so thankful that you came on here and did this. So, and we're doing a part 2, absolutely.
All right, man.
Yeah, soon.
All right,
I
thanks
mean,
for
if you want to
listening,
finish
guys.
that, just do a quick run.
No, because that story's going to go into another story,
yeah.
and then into
Well, that's,
another
I
story.
want the people to hear that story.
I want-
So we're going to do a part 2.
I need
definitely.
to do it justice.
Yes, absolutely. So people got a good idea who you are, where you came from, what's
Yeah.
going on, and now you're in North Carolina helping people every day. And we're going to give you the rest of the story in part 2.
Yeah, the Lord is good, guys.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
look forward.
Yep. Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.